Across Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts and YouTube, this is Talking Science with Dr. Brad Tucker and Matt Miller.
Brad, let's dive in. The Cold War is back on, it seems.
That's exactly right. I'm going to say nefarious, but interesting activities in space. And look, and this is something where we in the field have kind of known what's going on, and now it's becoming more and more public. And they're essentially things what we call inspector satellites. And so if you think about it, when you launch a satellite, you have a predefined orbit, you launch it into the orbit, it goes there. Now that's fine. And, satellites stay in their same orbits, physics, all that fun stuff. Except there's a class of satellites that have thrusters on board that can kind of change their orbit and swoop in. And the important part is you may think you put your satellite in a nice, safe spot, and then all of a sudden, whoop, someone parks right next to you, and you're no longer secure.
Is this like the movie Space Cowboys?
Look, less old guys. Well, I don't know, actually. Probably same amount of old guys, to be honest. But it's kind of this sci-fi world that is just reality. Because what Russia did, and this is not the first time they've did, this is now at least the second time I know of, they've built a satellite. And when that satellite was launched, a smaller satellite popped out of it. And then a smaller satellite popped out of that one, like the Russian babushka dolls. Really cool, kind of funny, impressive technology.
Culturally appropriate.
Well, yeah, and legally important, right? Because the laws are all governed around which country put up the satellite. It becomes a bit tricky to prove those satellites actually were put up by Russia. If they interfere, if they disable, they give a little tweak, they crash into something. There's a real propagation of effects here where you're not quite sure what it all means, yet you just know that kind of nothing is safe. And this is, is highlighted between the U.S. and Russia. It is not just a U.S. and Russian problem. I think a dozen countries now have inspector satellites that can swoop in and change their orbit. And it's not just countries that are affected. Private companies are interfered as well. Optus knows this is the big problem with their satellite network, that certain countries just swoop in and listen in.
And there are some pretty big security ramifications for this, and maybe something that is it a field that hasn't really been thought of in terms of laws and governing things on the way that this sort of stuff works?
Yeah, it's something that the space lawyers are really trying to get a grapple of what it means. And when we hear a space force, it's essentially this. You're not talking about militarized conflicts. I think it's more like space CIA is probably the way to thinking about it, right? Doing kind of covert activities slightly behind the scenes, but causing a lot of grief and chaos. You can imagine that if I move a satellite, you don't know where it is. You don't know if it's there. Well, let's say you move your satellite to get out of the way of space junk. Well, you inadvertently crash into mine. We both are destroyed, produces debris. But what if you don't know you're there and you're communicating secure information, credit card numbers, military information, you name it, and then you just have someone listening in on the whole conversation? It's essentially the new idea of espionage. It's not necessarily hacking into satellites. You just park next to it and you communicate with it. Or you give a little tweak or a little bump and you disable a $2 billion satellite.
And it's pretty important in terms of, the way what satellites are used for. Pretty much everything in our lives these days is dependent on satellites in some form or another. So this really could, and I'm pretty sure we've alluded to this before, it can lead to a tactical advantage for one country over another.
Yeah, you can purely imagine disabling a whole satellite infrastructure. It could disable a whole network. And as you said, it's not just simple radio communications or phone. You're talking about TV, banking, civilian transportation. There's a huge ramifications that happen here that people just don't appreciate. And this is why talking about Space Force is not a joke. This is what it's doing. And when other countries are going to do more and ramp up more activity, you're going to see more issues come into play, which will lead to conflicts on the ground.
And from an astronomer's perspective, what does it mean that the US military has publicly revealed this direct threat for the first time?
So it's something we've known about in the community. It's not a surprise to us. People are able to track satellites. It's easy to find them. The same reason why you kind of know that we get satellite interference through light pollution. But what it means then is that what else is going on up there? If this is the public stuff, what is the secret stuff? Right? And I'm not being naive. It's true. Right? If this is the stuff you're willing to know, they're able to document and say what it is, what it's doing, then there's a whole world of other stuff going on that is scarier.